Hello, my name is Austin, and this is the fifth in a series of 4 videos covering my backdrop to the Midnights video. And I feel very silly saying fifth in a series of 4, but I kind of painted myself into a corner because I didn't realize until the Infinite Jest video, which was the 3rd video in the series, that I was going to want to have a final video to sort of draw some conclusions. But at that point, I had already posted 2 videos in which I declared this a series of 4. So here I am releasing the 5th in a series of 4. And there's something inherently flawed with this video, because what I'm about to do is try to combine 4 works of art that were never meant to be viewed together, unless the 4 artists had a level of conspiracy I can't imagine. And so what I'm doing kind of feels like going out and buying 4 puzzles and just randomly grabbing pieces from each and trying to make something out of it, right? And I don't know, the only reason I could have for doing that is maybe it'll help me, so I'm hoping this will help me. It was kind of hard deciding the order to release the videos in, or more relevantly, the order to talk about the works of art. And there was, do I do it by release date? Do I do it by when I first interacted with the art? Do I do it when I sort of first started viewing the art the way I do? And there were many options. So what I ended up just doing is talking about them in the order I felt like. But it kind of is screwy for the way this video gets organized, because throughout the videos I referred to certain key ideas as deaths, and I introduced sort of 5 deaths, and as I talk about them in this video, it's going to be in a way where they don't appear in the order that they appeared in the first 4 videos. And I'm going to start with the debt from Inherent Vice, which is, I owe it to myself to live the best life possible. This was an idea that I believe I adopted in 2015, but I eventually lost it. And what happened was, in late 2017, I entered the first major depressive episode I had ever been in, and it sort of hit me like a train. I did not have the medications that I really needed for it, and I had never experienced that level of emotional distress. And functionally, for a few months, I was just in a place of existing at the most basic level. And what I mean by that is, like, remembering to eat at certain points couldn't be taken for granted. And so there really wasn't an idea of what's the best life possible. So I sort of forgot that idea. And then eventually I went through some treatment, and I got on a better medication system that it sort of elevated me out of that, to a place where I was more than just base existence, but I was still under a considerable amount of emotional distress, and I still am today. But in 2018, I really wasn't used to it, and as a result, I found myself spending a lot of time watching TV, playing video games, watching sports, or at its worst, lying in bed. And although I made it out of the sort of, like I said, the base level existence, I didn't remember the idea that I owe it to myself to live the best life possible. And it didn't really hit me until late 2018 of what I was doing. I don't want to say I was wasting away, but what I was doing was not the best I could do. And I um, at the end of 2018, I decided I wanted to try something different. So I set up a goal that in 2019 I was going to watch 365 movies. Um, and the odd thing about this goal was that it was really never about accomplishing it. Um, it was about encouraging myself to make the decision, like, for the next couple of hours, I'm not going to lie in bed. I'm going to do something that I believe is meaningful to me. And that was the idea, was to basically just keep myself from lying in bed. And for the people that I knew at the time that knew both I had the movie goal going and then also knew that I was in a very serious depression, um, I, I developed a sort of frustration of having to constantly explain, at least what I perceived as constantly explaining it. It probably wasn't that bad. Um, but I felt like I was always explaining that um, I didn't like watching movies. I didn't enjoy watching movies. Um, and and it certainly could not have been treated as something like a coping mechanism, um, because not only did movies not make me feel better, a lot of times they made me feel worse. The only reason for watching the movies was to not lie in bed, even though that was considerably more comfortable, right? I wasn't trying to feel good. I was trying to live the best life possible. And then I very much believed that struggling to watch a movie was a better life than lying in bed. And there's sort of a question of, well, why movies? Why was that the goal? And the answer is, like, I have a decent tolerance of emotional pain now, but in 2019, the list of things I could do that I could both tolerate and consider meaningful was very small. Um, right? Like, reading is very important to me now. It's a very important part of my life. But back in 2019, I did not have the ability to focus at a level required to read something. And additionally, spending time with people is very important to me now. But back then, there were really only two people I talked to outside of perceived necessity, and it was unbearable for me to be around people when I really wouldn't volunteer for it. Um, but as I've said, over the years, I've sort of picked up a certain tolerance for emotional distress. That's really changed the way that I approach life, and I can participate in a much wider variety of activities that I consider meaningful than I could even just 3 years ago. So I'm living life in a very different way now. But despite that, um, I had continued that goal, or that idea of an annual goal, up until maybe a couple months ago. Um, and it ended up being problematic this year. Not in the sense of it hurt me, but right, once again, in 2019, and my goal for this year was to read 52 books. Um, but the pursuit of the goal um, was was much different than the movie's goal. Because now, in this year, once again, I have a wide variety of meaningful activities I could participate in, and I found myself choosing reading over something like writing, or someone invited me to do something over the weekend, and I'm like, man, I'm behind on the reading, so I rejected it, and just things like that. And like even within reading itself, I was making odd decisions because like there's a book I bought earlier this year that I really wanted to read, but I avoided it because um, uh, it was long, or it is long, and I knew that I was going to want to read it twice when I read it. Once just powering through it as fast as I can, and then a second time just sort of grinding through it. Or not grinding, but like taking my time to absorb it. And I decided, no, I can't read this even though I'm trying to read a lot, because um, I want to accomplish the goal. And so if I'm deciding like certain types of reading are better than other types of reading, just to accomplish a goal, that doesn't make a lot of sense. Um, and right, so sort of the difference in the decision making in 2019 versus now is 2019 was movie or lie in bed. 2022 was reading or something that might legitimately be more meaningful to me right now. Um, and the reason why I feel like I can justify that statement is I I was actually doing fairly well with the reading goal. I believe I had read 37 books in 37 weeks or something like that. Um, but I dropped it because I sort of reached a point where I was saying if the goal of the goal is to live the best life possible, then the goal is broken at this point. In 2019 it worked, but now it's not working. And like I said, I had read 37 books in 37 weeks, which I don't know, maybe like 8 weeks ago or something like that. Nine, I don't know. And then I dropped the goal. And I truly believe that the reading goal wasn't working for me because um, once I dropped it, I haven't read since. Like, I haven't read in the last 8 or 9 weeks. And that has nothing to do with being burned out on reading. Um, it's simply just I've wanted to spend my time in other ways. I've been spending time with people. I've been writing, and I've started making these videos. And so I had reached a point where I had written a set of rules for myself years ago, but I had lost sight of the reasoning for those rules, and I moved into a different arena where I was just pursuing a goal of reading 52 books in a year for the sake of saying I read 52 books in a year. And this brings me into the second idea dash debt that I discussed in the first 4 videos, which was from Infinite Jest, which is there has to be a point where I question what my idea of success is. And I gave a brief discussion of what my high level definition of success was in the Infinite Jest video, which is do well in grade in high school, to get into a good college where you continue to do well, to get a financially rewarding job where you then continue to do well, to get raises and promotions, and sort of how I executed that plan very well. So once again, I talked about the high level definition of success. I didn't talk about what my granular definition of success was, right? The kind of definition that really influenced the day-to-day, in-the-moment decisions that sort of kept me on that path. And the idea of granular level success was quantifiable achievement, a number that could say I'm good. And it's sort of impossible to track this kind of thing, because I don't know, human life is complex. But I think my obsession with quantifiable achievement really became serious in college. And I say that because in college, quantifiable achievement, it just happened to me. I did very well in college. I was a mechanical engineering major at the University of Texas at Austin, and I had sort of beliefs about UT students and their quality, in the sense of I knew that UT was a highly ranked university, and even more so the engineering school within it. And I also knew that UT had a very low acceptance rate and was very selective. And from these things, I sort of inferred that students at the University of Texas, especially in the engineering program, were quality students. And I don't think this belief in itself is terrible, but I applied it in a bad way. And it's also kind of odd that there's sort of this disconnect where, like, I never really believed that UT was a great university, not in the sense of I thought it was bad or anything, but I didn't really trust rankings to define a university. And if you asked me if UT was good or bad, I would just shrug my shoulders, because it's the only school I'd gone to. I had nothing to compare it against. But I still had this opinion about UT students. I don't know. But that was important because college, unlike high school or middle school, not only was I given a grade on a test, usually the first lecture after the test, the professor would show the distribution of scores for the class, so I knew how I did relative to everyone in the class. And this was sort of where the idea of quantifiable achievement comes into place. It wasn't even the number of my grade, it was where I was in that ranking that felt good. Right, in engineering classes of, I don't know, let's say 100, 120 students, if I fell outside of the top 5, I considered it a poor performance, because I believe a lot of the time on exams I was in the top 5. And right when it comes to the idea of being a rat in a Skinner box, pushing a lever to get some kind of reward, um, I don't know if there's ever been an input reward experience that felt more rewarding than studying for a test that I then was the highest score in a class of over 100 students. Um, that made me feel very, very good, especially since, once again, I considered the other students in the class to be of a certain quality. And what I'm saying now is not a matter of me thinking I'm better than anyone else. I never considered it to be like that. Uh, what um, what it really was is an ability. It gave me an ability to derive value in myself in a very like American mythos, laissez-faire, Ayn Rand, objectivist way, where I could say it is my rational capacity that has led me to succeed. And that is something that I can then derive happiness from. And so, once again, I have this idea of quantifiable success, right, became very rewarding to me. And that was sort of, once again, that granular level of success, like pushing in certain directions to get some type of number that describes me to look good. And there are many ways I could discuss how trying to quantify myself has been very damaging, but I'm going to keep today pretty simple and once again return to the book and movie goals and the difference in how I sort of measured those things. With the movie goal, I did have a spreadsheet to track it, and there was a number saying which movie it was, but the spreadsheet also included the movie title, my rating of it, IMDb's rating of it, and even things like who recommended the movie to me. And it was more of a way to remember than anything else. And so, like, the lines would just be like, 1, this movie blank, 2, this movie continue, like that kind of thing. And it had real information in it. With the book goal, however, I actually went out and bought a whiteboard just for the goal, like a small one from like Office Depot or something, and I hung it up in my bedroom. And this is actually fairly significant to me because as someone with sleep issues, like I really try to only use my bedroom as a place for sleep. I try to do nothing else in there. And so to put a whiteboard up in my room is kind of significant. But anyways, on that whiteboard, the only thing that appeared were numbers. There were no book titles, there were no ratings, there was no review, nothing. It was just number of movies left, number of weeks left, number of nonfiction books left, number of rereads I'll allow myself. Things like this. Like, it was all numbers. And so I moved sort of from a place of having a goal to effectively make decisions to having a goal to have quantifiable success. And I sort of slipped into that bad routine. And if I could only give one difference in the way I treated the book and the movie goals, it would be to say with movies, I counted up. with books, I counted down. And this idea of quantifiable success is what brings me into the third debt from the works of art, which is from Mother Night, which is I need to be careful of what I'm pretending to be. And if even not that long ago you would ask me what I was, I would use terms like engineer, son, writer. And I didn't even consider that I was pretending to be these things. I just honestly believed that's what I was. I never considered that there's always this idea that I'm pretending to be something because I have definitions of what those things should be, and I'll never always meet them. And so by not acknowledging that I'm trying to accomplish a certain definition, I really ignored something important, which is what I was pretending to be was a perfect engineer or a perfect son or a perfect writer. And all of these things sort of came back to an idea of quantification. Like when it comes to being a perfect son, I would sit around and think like, okay, how long is it? How many days has it been since I've seen my parents? And the larger the number, the more I would hate myself. There was the quantification there. When it says being a perfect engineer, the only thing I really used for self-evaluation at work was sort of the volume of work I was accomplishing. And I don't mean that in the sense of I was sacrificing quality to boost numbers, but I just, right, like it's hard to measure the quality of your work if someone else isn't judging it. So the way that I evaluated myself was purely on quantifiable things and volume of work. What's it called? And then the idea of being a perfect writer. Like this one's kind of the oddest because I wrote a novel a couple of years ago, and I'm not I liked it then. I'm not a huge fan of it now, and that's because it violates the three tenets I have for writing now. Um, and that's not to say it's terrible. I just want to write the same thing today. But something odd is that I actually took a lot of pride, not just in the fact that I wrote a novel. Something that I actually took pride in was the word count, right? The idea that I wrote something that was tens of thousands of words, and just there's some odd level of pride in that, and I'm certain that I had pride in it because I remember when I had the novel edited, I was disappointed that the editing process cut a couple thousand words out, which is odd to be disappointed in because theoretically, like editing is making it a better book, and even if it makes it shorter, it's better, right? Theoretically. Um, but like I had this idea that word count is one of the things that made it impressive, and perhaps the weirdest part is um, it felt like work to build up the word count, and that was the idea of quantifiable success in that, um, or quantifiable achievement. And now when I write, I, I I really don't look at word count until the end, and it's actually quite a different experience in the sense of I sort of can't believe how big the number on the word count ends up being. Like for example, like it sort of blows me away that it takes me 3,000 words to write an essay that establishes a single definition for a single word. And I feel like I'm overly verbose, and I talk to people about, joke about brevity all the time. But and I just want to say I think it's pretty funny that as I was talking about brevity, my screen on my computer started to dim, and it's just a reminder like, look, you just took another 10 minutes. Anyways, but the other thing about word count that it surprises me the number is that big is that it just simply feels like I didn't write that much, and that I wasn't taking that much time, and it didn't feel like work at all. And so, sort of, that's the approach to word count I have now. And um, I mentioned that I have three tenets of writing, that first novel sort of violated all of them. And those tenets have nothing to do um, with how to write better. They have to do with how to make the experience of writing better. Um, and they absolutely have nothing quantifiable about them. So I have talked about the ideas of trying to be a perfect son, a perfect um, engineer, a perfect writer, whatever. And these things seem very reasonable to say I was pretending to be that, because a lot of people over the years have applied the term perfectionist to me. And on some logical level, I understood what they were saying. On some knowledge type level, I knew that they were probably right. But it never really stuck with me, and I think the reason for that is the comments about me being a perfectionist always followed a statement on an individual situation. I would make a comment along the lines of, I should have done this, I should have done that. And that's when I would get the feedback about being a perfectionist. And I think it never really stuck because, um, in my mind, yes, okay, no human being is perfect, but that doesn't change that I messed up that individual. Like, I messed up that individual situation. It's still completely factual. What I didn't realize was that I needed to take a step back from that, and look at the collection of decisions, and the collection of situations and the collection of behaviors, um, and to say, okay, I'm not going to get these all right, and that's what I wasn't doing, um, and so once again, I had these ideas: perfect son, perfect engineer, perfect writer. What I ultimately, until very recently, didn't realize what I was pretending to be, um, is a perfect person. And this leads into Good Kid, Mad City with the line, I'm a sinner who's probably going to sin again. And my version of that being, I'm a human being who's going to continue to make mistakes. And right, this is sort of the idea, like the place where I'm finally sort of able to step back and look at that claim that I'm pretending to be a perfect person, and how problematic that is. Um, and I recently had a conversation with someone in which I said, human being is the nicest thing I've ever called myself. And part of that has to do with I've engaged in my fair share of negative self-talk, but I I would also have a problem when I would say something positive about myself. For example, I've said I'm smart. I would always immediately follow it with, but I could be smarter. I think someday I'm gonna make a video on the song Enough for You by Olivia Rodrigo. Um, but right now I'm just gonna talk about the word enough. And enough is one of the more damaging words in my vocabulary, um, because the only time I use or enough as an adverb to an adjective I'm using to describe myself is to declare I have a deficiency. And the reason why I say calling myself a human being is the nicest thing I've ever said to myself is because the term enough can't apply to my definition of human being, right? You're either human or you aren't. And I, as a matter of fact, am a human. Um, and there's nothing that I can do to make myself anything more than that. And there's a certain amount of peace in saying that. And this brings me into my final debt to these works, which goes back to inherent or to infinite jest, with the idea of I can make healthy decisions within a broken system. Everything I've said in this video so far has been to establish the system I believe I live in. And I mentioned in the Infinite Jest video, there's internal systems and there's external systems. And real quick, I'm going to use an external system to describe my internal system, even though they're not really the same. So between last night and this morning, I watched a docu-series called How to Fix a Drug Scandal, which sort of covers the misconduct of two different bench chemists that were part of the Massachusetts criminal justice system, that their actions led to thousands of cases being dismissed. One of them was performing tests while high, and the other one was delivering false results on tests she never ran. And I'm not here to talk about Massachusetts criminal justice system. I really am not capable of that for multiple reasons. One, I've never worked in a criminal justice system. Two, I don't know outside of the criminal justice system what the budget of Massachusetts is like. And three, and I can't emphasize enough how important this part is my entire knowledge of this situation is from a docuseries, which is a vessel for entertainment, not objective legal discussion. But I am going to talk about one of the situations, or one of the bench chemists, which was the one who was high at work, um, with the assumption that there was a certain level of factual accuracy in the docuseries. Um, and once again, um, this is a chemist who was running drug tests to confirm what a substance was, um, while under the influence of a variety of substances. Um, and I am not trying to absolve her of responsibility in this situation, because I believe she has a considerable amount of responsibility here. What I'm trying to say is I'm concerned with how long she was able to work under the influence of drugs in a capacity that potentially determined whether or not someone was going to prison. How she was able to do that for years without being caught. Um, and once again, this is someone that was smoking crack into a fume hood, was stealing drugs, um, that were getting shipped for testing, that was literally cooking crack at work with lab equipment. Um, and she is very important in all that, but just once again, how is she able to get away with this for years? And the idea is she is a single point of failure in a system that sends people to prison. Um, and I'm not here to demand reform. I don't believe I have the capability of that. It's fairly easy for me to say that there should have been oversight installed in this situation. But I mean, at what point do you stop the reform? Like, how much oversight do you add to the system as a whole? How much does that all cost? I don't know. So I'm not trying to say the state of Massachusetts needed to change. What I am here to say is they had a single point of failure that was a human being, and in order for a system to work, they required a human being to be perfect. And that is a system with a lot of risk. And once again, I'm not here to say what's an acceptable level of risk. What I am here to say is when you operate a system where somebody needs to be perfect, you can't be baffled that something went wrong because a person wasn't perfect. And so that idea of an external system where a lack of perfection seems to be unacknowledged brings me to my idea of the internal system I'm in. And once again, Infinite Jest had this idea of addiction as a disease and that disease as the system that people were operating in, and that's what I mean by internal system. For me, the internal system I believe I'm operating in is the simple statement, I am a human being. Right? And this inherits the concept from the Massachusetts criminal system of you can't demand something imperfect to be perfect, and that's the part of the system that I have to recognize is that I am a human being and I cannot expect perfection, and I can't expect rationality in all decisions. Um, and I quoted a few passages from Infinite Jest, but a quote within the quote, I don't have the book in front of me, so I'm paraphrasing, but when it described AA, I believe the verbiage was, it is a goofily simple, practical set of rules to remember you're living with the disease day by day and how to treat the disease day by day. And this is sort of that idea that I'm talking about, and from that I got from Infinite Jest, which is I can make healthy decisions within a broken system. And I consider being a human a broken system. Not in the sense that it's bad, but once again, I am not perfect. I cannot expect perfection. I am irrational in many situations, and I can't expect rationality in all cases. And so all these things that I'm pretending to be, perfect son, perfect engineer, perfect writer, and then overall perfect person, then falls into this system of I am a human being, and they simply do not work together. And so what I'm trying to do now is make healthy decisions within the system of being a human being. And that involves, on some levels, embracing irrationality. And something that I wish I had learned a lot earlier in life was it is possible to make an irrational decision that is incredibly well thought out. And it is possible to make an irrational decision that's healthy. And I've reached a point where I'm much more interested in making healthy decisions than rational ones. And I actually have a recent example of that, which is I, as of last Saturday, actually have 2 cell phones and 2 cell phone numbers. And this is kind of odd for a person to do. And the system works this way. This is the second phone with a number I've never had before. It only has 3 optional apps. The first of which is Spotify, or the most important of which is Spotify. And significantly, this phone number gets calls forwarded from my original phone number, the phone number that everyone has saved in their phones. So if anyone calls the number that they've always had saved, I can still get that call. And more importantly, text do not get forwarded. If I get a text message to the phone number that everyone has, it will go to this phone, and I will not receive it on this phone, on the new phone. And this seems odd. This seems like a very weird system. And so the question is, where is this coming from? And something I've realized is for a long time, I really haven't used cell phones, in particular smartphones, in a healthy way. Um, I don't know why it is, but I obsess over getting replies to text messages or emails or whatever, but mostly text. I just obsess over it. And there were things that I tried to do in the past, where I would um, turn off notifications for everything besides phone calls, basically. And I would on Spotify queue up about 100 songs, and I would listen through the queue, and by about 100, I would queue up at least 100 songs, which is something like 5 to 6 hours normally. And I would listen through that queue, and while the queue was playing, I would place my phone um, at a physically separated distance in another room or something like that. Or if I was at work, I would place it in a drawer. And I wouldn't let myself look at it outside of a very defined reason until that queue was up. So I would go 5 or 6 hours without looking at my phone. And this actually worked fairly well. Having a physical distance between me and my phone um, was a pretty good system. The problem is music is incredibly important to me, and I would the queue system didn't work because I would find myself being in certain situations where I would want to be listening to a particular song, or like I would want to listen to a song on repeat, or just anything like that. Uh, and then I would find myself walking over to my phone, messing around on Spotify, and a lot of times that I did this, I would end up checking text too, or whatever, and then like eventually like the system just sort of dissolved to where, because I wanted to be able to control um, Spotify, and this happens in a lot of situations, not just at home. Um, I would just keep my phone with me. Um, and that brought me back into a system of checking text, and this sort of culminated into last Friday where I don't really know what's going on, but I had multiple texts with individuals, with groups, whatever, where like I had sent a bunch of texts out and I was waiting for responses for a number of them, and I didn't get there was like a 4 hour window where I didn't get a response, which is odd because like I usually, I don't know. And when I say a 4 hour window without response being odd, I mean in the sense of it's really not that long of a period of time. And despite that, I still found myself checking my text every 5 or so minutes, knowing that if there was no response, it was gonna upset me and all this stuff. And I realized that okay, like I tried some things and they haven't worked. So this is a situation where theoretically I should, if I was rational, I would be able to not obsess over my text. But I am a human being. That is the system. And this may be a place where I need to embrace irrationality. Um, and and the way that I embrace that irrationality once again is getting this second phone, which I have with me at all times. And once again, most importantly, I can listen to music. I can um, uh, receive phone calls. And I also have basic smartphone capabilities in the event of an emergency, which is actually kind of important to me. However, I have this phone that receives text, and this is obviously not true for the making of this video, but this phone, outside of explicit reason, never leaves my car. And that is how I create that physical separation that I want. So I get all the things that I'd like to have within striking distance while also having physical separation from the things that cause me issues. And the reason why I struggled with deciding to go through with this is because the second phone number does not come free. I paid $70 a month for the right to have a second phone number. And that, once again, like, rationally, I should not be spending $70 a month here. But that is trying to apply a rational solution to an irrational problem, which has so far had unhealthy results. So I'm just trying something irrational. And when I think of the consequences of this irrational decision, it actually gets a little odd, because once I step away from the concept of making a rational or correct choice and ask myself, what is the consequence of this? Well, I don't have to have this phone number forever. I can cancel it at any point. So essentially what it is it's just $70 a month to see if it'll work out. And I'm going to say that the following statement I have involves a significant amount of privilege, but I have the financial stability to lose $70 a month. It's just a statement that's true. Once again, I'm fortunate that statement's true, and it's not true for everyone. And so, sort of the idea of this second phone number to me is it's nothing more than a bet I make every month. And that bet is I'm putting $70 on this second phone number, helping me enjoy life more. And that sounds odd, but the weird thing about it is this is not the first bet of this sort that I've made. In addition to having a second phone number, I have subscriptions to Netflix, Hulu, HBO Max, Disney Plus, Amazon Prime, and I haven't calculated the exact monthly cost for these, but I would say I'm certain it's on the scale of $70 a month, and there's nothing necessary about any of these services, right? And if I think about it, they are kind of irrational. To claim that I have to have those services to enjoy life is would be to claim that nobody enjoyed life before, I don't know, 2007 or some shit. And I don't think that's true. So I in a rational way, I shouldn't pay money for these. And functionally, all these subscription services is me every month betting $70 that they're going to help me enjoy life more. And although there should be a discussion about why I don't question the subscription services, but but I put myself through an entire thought process on this phone. I just want to say today that um, nothing terrible has happened to me so far because I've had subscription services. Um, and because of that, I think it's pretty unlikely that anything terrible is going to happen to me because I have a second cell phone. And so this, to me, sort of is the idea that I'm going for. Is this is an irrational decision that very well could be healthy. And finally, I'm going to bring this all back to the Midnights video. Because once again, I'm living in a system in which I'm a human being. And really, at this point in my life, what I'm interested in is being healthy. And something that I've never had a great grasp on is how to express myself. And I've never been certain about what's the right thing to say, what's appropriate, what not. But now I'm just making guesses on what's healthiest for me. And that sometimes involves trying something new. And the Midnights video was me trying something new in an attempt to be as healthy as possible. And I really didn't know how it was going to go when I started on it, but I think it and even this video and the last four have ended up being incredibly healthy for me. And my justification for that is in the Midnights video, I made the statement that creating that video helped me come to the belief that things can get better. And actually, in that video, that was the last statement made, sort of in the segment based on the Snow on the Beach lyrics, and it's kind of odd because like in the other 6 songs I talked about, I closed each section on the the lyric that I started with, but in the Snow on the Beach section, I didn't repeat the lyric, and the reason for that is once again the last thing was that I believe the last thing I said in that segment was I believe things can get better. And the reason why I cut the clip there instead of including the lyric is that was really the first time I had said that out loud, and I really almost broke down. And so I couldn't continue through quoting the lyric. And right, I haven't been doing this long enough to know these videos really are healthy for me, but if after all the things I've gone through, uh, if making one of these videos has helped me be able to say out loud and actually believe something as significant as things can get better. I don't know. It feels incredibly healthy. The music I've listened to while making this video is actually the Midnights album again, but this time the 3 a.m. edition with the 7 extra songs included.